God. Are you gonna bowl right now?
Yeah, right. Told you, so watch your feet.
Oh my God.
Oh my God, are you okay?
People thought Jarrod Schulz was just the wild card on Storage Wars. Loud, unpredictable, reckless at times, and always one bad decision away from trouble. But behind the cameras, behind the jokes, and far away from the storage lockers, there were warnings. Quiet ones at first, then louder, until eventually everyone close to him began to step back. And now, after years of controversy, legal trouble, broken relationships, and a downfall no one saw coming, those warnings suddenly look like prophecies. What really happened to Jarrod Schulz? And why are people saying it's already too late? The rise nobody expected. Jarrod Schulz did not step into Storage Wars as a polished TV star. He came in rough around the edges, messy, brash, and full of confidence that bordered on delusion. In the early seasons, viewers loved him because he was unpredictable. Sometimes he bid recklessly and looked foolish. Other times he stumbled into huge wins that shocked even the veteran buyers. But behind the humor was something else. Jarrod loved risk. Not strategic, calculated risk. The kind that comes from impulse, adrenaline, and proving yourself in front of a crowd. People close to the show whispered even then that Jarrod wasn't thinking long-term. He wasn't saving money. He wasn't building a brand. He was living moment to moment, high on the thrill of the gamble. And yet, he was becoming famous. He had a supportive partner in Brandy. They were raising a family together. They owned a store. Life looked good. So why did people on the show quietly warn, even then, that something about Jarrod felt unstable? Why did they say his rise was built on a foundation that couldn't last? Was it just jealousy? Or did they already see the cracks forming? A relationship on the edge. By the middle of Storage Wars, viewers noticed something. The tension between Jarrod and Brandy wasn't just playful banter. What began as light teasing slowly evolved into arguments, then eye rolls, then public frustration, then full-on exhaustion. Brandy, who was often the grounded thinker, grew tired of watching Jarrod drop thousands of dollars on units that made no sense. She grew tired of being the responsible one at home, while Jarrod lived like a bachelor with a TV crew behind him. She grew tired of feeling like she was raising 3 kids instead of 2. And yet, she stayed. She tried. She kept the store open, kept the family together, kept their TV partnership alive. But behind the scenes, friends noticed something shifting. Brandy stopped laughing as much. She stopped covering for Jarrod's mistakes. She stopped pretending everything was fine. People warned Jarrod then, "You're losing her." But he didn't listen. Fans assumed the two were inseparable. But those who knew them said the breakup wasn't sudden at all. It was a slow collapse, the kind that happens when one person changes and the other refuses to. So the real question becomes, when their partnership finally shattered, was it the result of years of small fractures, or one final blow we didn't see? The breakup that broke everything. When news finally spread that Jarrod and Brandy had split, fans reacted with shock, but insiders didn't. Those closest to them had watched the partnership unravel thread by thread. Still, the public breakup hit harder than anyone expected. It wasn't just the end of a relationship. It was the collapse of the foundation that held Jarrod's life together. The show tried to pretend nothing had changed at first. Jarrod still walked into storage lockers with his usual swagger, throwing out bids, puffing out his chest, trying to show viewers, and maybe himself, that he was fine. But something was missing. The dynamic energy that came from Brandy challenging him, grounding him, balancing him, it was gone. And without that anchor, Jarrod drifted. Producers noticed. Fans noticed. Even Jarrod's co-stars noticed. Off camera, Jarrod's life began spiraling. Running a store alone was harder than he admitted. Money didn't stretch as far without Brandy managing the books. His impulsive spending habits became more pronounced. The pressure to maintain a public image while his private life collapsed became overwhelming. And then, one by one, people around Jarrod started saying the same thing. He's not the same person anymore. Without Brandy, Jarrod wasn't just single. He was untethered. The breakup didn't just expose his flaws, it magnified them. And every bad decision he made afterward felt like the loud echo of a warning he ignored for years. But the real question is, was the breakup the beginning of the downfall, or merely the moment the world finally saw it happening? The night everything changed. If the breakup cracked Jarrod's life, the 2021 incident shattered it completely. It was supposed to be a simple night out. Nothing dramatic, nothing unusual. But what happened that night became a turning point so serious that Storage Wars never recovered its old identity. And Jarrod never recovered his old reputation. Jarrod was accused of pushing Brandy during an argument. The confrontation, which allegedly happened at a bar, broke open old wounds and instantly became tabloid fuel. Fans who once saw Jarrod as the lovable troublemaker now viewed him through a darker lens. Social media lit up with anger, confusion, and disappointment. People demanded answers. People demanded consequences. And consequences came fast. The legal system got involved. The show distanced itself. Cast members stopped speaking publicly about him. Brandy remained quiet, refusing to feed the fire. But the silence itself said more than words ever could. This wasn't just another Jarrod mistake. This wasn't impulsive bidding or reckless spending. This was life-changing. Suddenly, the man who lived loudly on TV was living under a cloud of suspicion, legal scrutiny, and public judgment. The producers didn't officially fire him, but they didn't need to. He quietly disappeared from episodes, absent without explanation, as if the show itself was trying to erase him frame by frame. For the first time, Jarrod wasn't the wild card. He wasn't the comic relief. He wasn't the unpredictable gambler. He was the scandal. The warnings people had whispered about for years were suddenly screaming in the open. But the question that remains is this: did Jarrod finally realize that this moment was the point of no return? Or was this only the beginning of something even worse? The fall of the man viewers thought they knew. After the bar incident, Jarrod tried to continue life as if everything were manageable, but nothing about his world was stable anymore. The charm that once carried him through tough negotiations no longer worked in everyday life. Friends described him as restless, almost agitated, constantly pacing, constantly making plans he never followed through on, constantly trying to outrun the reality closing in around him. He kept insisting he'd bounce back. He told people the show would call him again, that he'd reinvent himself, that he wasn't done. But behind closed doors, it became painfully clear that this wasn't a temporary setback. It was a downward spiral he couldn't control. The fame that once lifted him had now become a weight around his neck, a reminder of everything he'd lost and everything he wished he could get back. Without the cameras to hide behind, Jarrod found himself confronting parts of his life he never had to face before. Money problems hit harder when he didn't have the show to boost his businesses. Opportunities dried up as his reputation changed. Even longtime fans, people who supported him from the first episode, began questioning who he really was. Jarrod felt cornered, judged, misunderstood, but he never admitted the responsibility he carried in creating the situation. The world now saw two versions of him: the reckless risk-taker they once loved, and the troubled man caught in controversies of his own making. And as those two images collided, Jarrod was forced into the one thing he'd always avoided: self-reflection. But behind that reflection was another looming question. Was Jarrod strong enough to confront the consequences? Or was this the moment that would finally break him completely? Long before the scandals, Jarrod dreamed of building something that would outlive him. His thrift store, Now and Then, wasn't just a workplace. It was his pride, his proof that he could build a business from scratch without relying on anyone. But as chaos seeped deeper into his life, even the store began showing signs of strain. Inventory sat untouched. Bills piled up on desks he no longer visited. Employees whispered about hours being cut and paychecks arriving late. The colorful, energetic environment that once defined the shop slowly faded into disorganization and uncertainty. Regular customers noticed. Locals whispered. The decline wasn't sudden. It was quiet, gradual, almost invisible, unless you were watching closely. By the time most fans realized something was wrong, the damage had already been done. The store he once poured his identity into was slipping from his hands, and Jarrod didn't have the strength, or perhaps the clarity, to save it. This wasn't the dramatic collapse of a business. It was the slow suffocation of one man's dream. What hurt most was that Jarrod still clung to the idea that he could fix everything. He kept making promises he couldn't keep, insisting that better days were coming, insisting that one good deal, one fresh opportunity, one lucky break would put everything back on track. But those days never came. Instead, his business became a silent reflection of his personal life, disorganized, unstable, and slowly falling apart. People who once saw him as the bold bidder, the fearless entrepreneur, now saw a man fighting battles no one fully understood. And as the world around him changed, Jarrod was forced into one of the hardest questions of his life. Was this truly the end of his career? Or was there still one last chance for redemption waiting somewhere ahead? The friends who saw the storm coming. As Jarrod's life grew more chaotic, the people closest to him began noticing cracks long before the public did. Old acquaintances from the storage auction circuit recalled moments where Jarrod seemed distracted, irritable, or strangely distant, as if his mind was constantly wrestling with something he couldn't or wouldn't say out loud. They didn't know the details, but they sensed it. The man who had once walked into every room with fearless energy was losing control of himself. Some tried to step in quietly. A few reached out with compassion, hoping to pull him aside and ask if he was okay, hoping he'd drop the mask for just long enough to admit that things were falling apart. But Jarrod wasn't ready for that. Pride and stubbornness, the same traits that made him a fierce bidder, became the very reasons he pushed help away. Every concern felt like criticism, every suggestion felt like judgment, and every person who cared felt like someone he needed to distance himself from. That distance didn't happen overnight, but gradually, one strained relationship at a time. Phone calls went unanswered, invitations were ignored. Jarrod buried himself in noise, late nights, new acquaintances, impulsive decisions, anything to drown out the voices reminding him of the life he was losing. Even people who had known him for years, people who had watched him rise from a young hustler to a reality TV standout, couldn't reach him anymore. And yet, what made this chapter of his life truly heartbreaking was the realization that Jarrod wasn't avoiding people because he didn't care about them. He was avoiding them because he feared what they might see. A man slipping, spiraling, unraveling in ways he didn't know how to stop. He feared their disappointment more than he feared the consequences of being alone. But isolation can only hold back the truth for so long. And in Jarrod's case, being alone didn't harden him. It made the cracks even more visible. The world was watching, waiting to see whether he'd confront the storm or be consumed by it. The question now wasn't whether he'd fall, it was how far the fall would take him, and who, if anyone, would still be there when he hit the bottom. The public turns, and Jarrod faces a new reality. One of the most painful shifts in Jarrod's story came when the public, once loyal, entertained, even protective of him, began to change their tone. For years, viewers adored the unpredictable bidder with a mischievous grin. They celebrated his risks, his comebacks, his wild strategies. But as more controversies resurfaced and more incidents became public, the narrative flipped almost overnight. Suddenly, online comments that once cheered him on now questioned his character. Forums filled with speculation. Social media posts turned harsh. Fans debated whether they ever truly knew the man behind the sunglasses and sarcastic jokes. And as the criticism grew louder, Jarrod found himself facing something far more damaging than bad press: the erosion of the persona he had built his entire career on. He tried to defend himself in subtle ways: brief statements, half-hearted attempts to appear unbothered. But the truth was unavoidable. Fame is a double-edged sword. It can lift you higher than you ever imagined, but it can also expose you, strip you bare, and leave you vulnerable in ways ordinary life never could. What hurt Jarrod most wasn't just the backlash. It was how quickly support evaporated. People he once entertained for years now judged him from headlines alone. Those who had laughed with him now laughed at him. And the silence from the world that once adored him became almost unbearable. This shift didn't just bruise his ego, it forced him into a moment of harsh clarity. Without a television show to frame his story, without producers guiding the edits, without a fan base automatically rooting for him, Jarrod was left with the raw, unfiltered version of his life. And in that version, he wasn't the hero. He wasn't even the problem solver. He was a man standing at the edge of something that looked dangerously close to collapse. He still wasn't ready to admit responsibility. He still wasn't ready to confront the choices that led him here. But for the first time, he began to wonder whether everyone had been right to warn him, and whether ignoring those warnings was the mistake that changed everything. The real question now was simple, yet brutal. Could Jarrod rebuild from this? Or was this the moment his story truly took its darkest turn? The night everything changed. There comes a moment in every downfall where a person reaches a crossroads, not because they choose to, but because life forces them into it. For Jarrod Schulz, that moment arrived quietly, without cameras, without crowds, without the adrenaline of an auction floor. It happened in a dimly lit parking lot, late at night, when he found himself sitting alone in his truck, staring at the steering wheel like it held the answers to everything he'd been running from. Up until then, he had convinced himself he was in control, that the chaos swirling around him was temporary, manageable, something he could muscle his way through with attitude and bravado. But on that particular night, the weight of everything he'd ignored, every warning, every burned bridge, every consequence that had finally caught up, felt heavier than ever before. He wasn't the bold, unstoppable bidder anymore. He wasn't the confident co-star of Storage Wars. He was a man who had quietly lost the respect of friends, the stability of home life, and the security of a television platform that once defined him. And in that stillness, a frightening thought settled over him. What if everyone was right? What if he really had become the villain of his own story? Jarrod had always been the kind of person who thrived on movement. If he was busy, he didn't have to think. If he was hustling, he didn't have to feel. But sitting in that motionless truck, with nowhere left to run and no one left to blame, he felt exposed in a way he never had before. The silence became a mirror, reflecting a version of himself he didn't recognize. That night didn't bring answers, but it brought awareness, and awareness brings choice. Would he continue pretending nothing was wrong, allowing the spiral to deepen? Or would he finally confront the truth, even if doing so meant tearing down everything he thought he was? The world didn't know it yet, But this was the moment that would shape the next chapter of his life and determine whether he'd ever reclaim the respect he once had. The fallout no one expected. When Jarrod finally emerged from his private turmoil, the world around him had changed faster than he anticipated. News cycles moved quickly, gossip spread even faster, and soon he realized that reclaiming his place in the public eye would be far more difficult than losing it had been. People didn't see him as a misunderstood figure or a man under pressure. They saw controversy, headlines, mistakes. They saw someone who didn't look like the lovable rogue from television anymore. Businesses he once relied on became wary. Opportunities vanished before they even reached him. And contacts who used to call him daily now hesitated, unsure whether associating with him would help or hurt their own reputations. That kind of shift doesn't just affect a career, it affects a person's sense of identity. Jarrod had built his life on the belief that confidence alone could carry him through any storm. Now that belief was being tested harder than ever before. Worse, the people who had warned him, who had tried to pull him back from the ledge, were no longer waiting in the wings. Some had moved on. Others had been pushed away too many times to keep trying. And as Jarrod began rebuilding bits of his life, he realized he was doing it without the support system he never thought he'd lose. The truth is, consequences don't just show up once. They echo, they repeat, they linger long after the headlines fade, and Jarrod felt that echo every time he stepped into a room and noticed a change in tone. Every time someone hesitated to greet him. Every time an opportunity slipped through his fingers before he even had a chance to prove he'd changed. But perhaps the hardest part was accepting that the world wasn't going to rewrite his story for him. If he wanted redemption, he would have to earn it. Not through charm, not through sheer personality, but through real effort and accountability he'd avoided for far too long. That raised the question that would define the rest of his journey. Could Jarrod truly transform himself, or had the damage gone too deep to repair? A reputation on the brink. As Jarrod attempted to move forward, he realized something painful. The world no longer saw him through the lens of possibility, but through the shadow of his past. The conversations he overheard were no longer about the units he won, the banter he brought, or the reckless charm that made viewers laugh. Instead, whispers centered on questions he had no power to silence. Everywhere he went, eyes followed him a little too long, gauging his demeanor, searching for signs of progress or signs of deterioration. Even the bravest among us crumble under that constant microscope. Jarrod wasn't just trying to rebuild a business or a career, he was trying to rebuild an identity. The man who once walked into auctions with swagger now entered rooms with caution. Confidence had become a performance, and even that performance faltered. There were moments when he tried to reach out to people from his past, old colleagues, former friends, even distant acquaintances who once admired his hustle. Some conversations started off warm, familiar, nostalgic even. But eventually, a shift always came. Voices grew guarded, energy turned careful. The weight of what he represented, controversy, instability, unpredictability, cast a long shadow, and few wanted to stand in it. Jarrod wasn't used to being doubted, but now, doubt became the air he breathed. He could feel it even in silence. And the hardest part was acknowledging that people weren't wrong to be cautious. He had made decisions that hurt people, and the fallout didn't disappear simply because he now wanted a clean slate. But beneath the setbacks, beneath the frustration and regret, something unexpected began to stir inside him. A sense of humility, a realization that life wasn't going to hand him redemption simply because he missed who he used to be. If he wanted trust, he would have to earn it one step at a time. Quietly, consistently, without shortcuts. Yet even as he pushed himself toward growth, an unsettling question nagged at him. Would the public ever allow him to evolve? Or would he forever be defined by his darkest chapters? That uncertainty, lingering, heavy, was the burden he now carried. The future no one predicted. With time working against him and opportunities slipping through his fingers, Jarrod faced a new phase of life, one where reinvention wasn't optional, but necessary. For the first time in years, he stopped looking backward and began to evaluate the landscape ahead. What did he actually have left? What could he realistically build? What parts of his old life were worth holding on to? And what parts were only dragging him deeper into the past? He began taking small steps, ones that didn't make headlines, ones that didn't appear on social media. He showed up to meetings on time. He completed projects quietly. He followed through on commitments even when no one was watching. These were not grand gestures, but they were the kind of foundational changes that rebuild character from the inside out. Yet the reality remained. The world didn't trust him. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. And instead of running from that truth, Jarrod slowly began to accept it. This wasn't a comeback story. Not yet. This was a rebuilding story. One brick at a time. One choice at a time. One honest step forward at a time. There were days when he felt that maybe, just maybe, he was making progress. He wasn't the loudest person in the room anymore. He wasn't the most reckless. He wasn't the first to create tension. There was a softness to him now, carved out by mistakes and consequences and raw experience. But there were also days when everything collapsed again, when a single rumor spread online, or a new challenge rose up, or someone brought up his past with no concern for the person he was trying to become. Those days were the hardest, because they reminded him that redemption is not linear. It is a long, uneven road filled with setbacks. Still, Jarrod kept going. He didn't know if the world would ever welcome him back. He didn't know if storage wars would ever call again. He didn't know if he'd ever escape the cloud that followed him. But he knew one thing. He wasn't done fighting for the man he wanted to be. And perhaps that is the true arc of his story. Not fame, not controversy, but the quiet, painful, necessary work of transformation. Jarrod Schulz is a reminder of something we often forget. Every public figure has a private battle. Every villain has a backstory. And every downfall has layers the world rarely sees. His journey hasn't been glamorous. It hasn't been easy. And it hasn't been forgiven by everyone. But it is real, messy, human. Whether he rises again or continues rebuilding in the shadows, his story is far from finished. Redemption, after all, rarely happens on camera. It happens in the quiet moments no one talks about. If you've watched this far, thank you for sticking with the truth. Not the headlines, not the assumptions, but the deeper story beneath them. And if you want more untold stories, more raw truths, and more behind-the-scenes realities the public never gets to see, make sure to like, subscribe, and stay tuned. There's always more to uncover. And sometimes the stories we think we know are only the beginning.